It's our community, and you know that we have lots of interesting neighbors, and I like to find them so that you know that there are people out there that do something different and maybe don't think quite like everybody else does. And however, I must say that you have told me that more people are beginning to join Kansas City Oasis. And Kansas City Oasis, and this is Helen Stringer, who is the director. It's an innovative community. Would you say that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's where free thinkers and atheists and agnostics and skeptics and humanists and deists and theists that question are welcome to come and celebrate life and find what?
Community, connection. You know, that foundational thing that I think in our culture tends to be dominated by church. And for those of us who don't fit in church for whatever the reason, we kind of miss out on that. And so we're providing that without the elements that we don't like the dogma and the exclusion.
Well, and in your materials that I read, you make a large point that they celebrate the human experience.
Exactly.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I can only really speak for myself to some extent, but as someone who would fall into the unaffiliated or the nuns, the NONESs category, that is that large growing demographic, I personally tend to lean towards the idea that this is it. And so I want to make every day count as much as I possibly can. So celebrating the human experience means, having people and opportunities to celebrate the really great things in life. And then life can be pretty darn tough too. It can be really bad, so we need people and support systems and, connections in place that help us get through those times. It's all of that and everything in between as well, is that human experience.
Don't you think that churches to some degree fill that void in a little different format, but they do fill the void of community, perhaps, social contacts, people to talk to?
I will agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's what they've done really well, over the last 100 years.
But the format's different. And so, the whole idea is prayer and belief and faith. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole different set of mysteries, if you will.
Sure. Yeah.
But I have to say that Helen graduated from a Pentecostal school.
Yep.
With a degree in pastoral studies.
I did.
So you were going great guns with the Pentecostals there for a while.
I mean, yes and no. So it's tricky. I changed majors a handful of times. I was a music major to start, and then being in a very conservative school, there is a big push to join the ministry, and I definitely do fall into the category of wanting to help people, like a lot of pastors do. So yes, I left school thinking I wanted to be a pastor or a leader in that sense. But I was not Pentecostal actually anymore when I was done with school. So I kind of bounced my way to be slowly started to push more, not quite liberal, but not quite as extreme as Pentecostal.
Yeah, they are a little
Pentecostal,
extreme.
I would say they're pretty far on the spectrum
yes, they are.
of the
But your
extreme
husband was
side.
only slightly better, because he is from an Assemblies of God.
He grew up in it. That's all he knows. That's his childhood. I did not, actually. He's the one that pulled me into it. Yeah. He pulled me into it when I was 17. It's his fault. He takes full responsibility for that. So I was actually kind of part of a Presbyterian youth group that was...
But you were always religious.
I mean, in some respects, maybe. My parents have always been wonderful in the sense that whatever my interests were, they pretty much encouraged. Granted, all my interests were positive things, but in my house, it was never a discussion. Religion really wasn't. We had dinner together every single night. We talked about, my mom was a teacher, she talked about her classroom. My dad was a city administrator, so he talked about his passion for the city that we lived in, political issues and things like that, but I never felt like my parents wanted to make sure I was going to heaven. It was a non-issue. So it wasn't until high school where I started to become associated with a youth group, and they kind of pulled me in a little bit, and I became Christian thinking that that was the really great way to live life, that Jesus was this really great example of a humanist, of someone who cared about people, wanted to make the world a better place, and his example was a good example.
True.
And I think I never had a fear of hell personally. My husband has a very different story. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was like, this is an example I'd like to live by. and then, college and stuff, and from there on, it all started to not
Well, you said
hold pieces
you used
together.
the word unravel.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what were you thinking? I mean, that's what the church said. What are you thinking? Yeah.
Honestly, my husband and I both, we went on this journey together, which is sometimes rare. But we thought that truth was truth and truth would prevail. The Christian, especially evangelicals, like to push this whole truth ideology. But I remember really well in his early 20s thinking, if this is true, the more we study it, the better I'll understand it, the better I'll explain it. I want to know why I believe what I believe. And so we eventually, it took a couple years, but like piece by piece, we're like, well, this doesn't make sense. Now this doesn't make sense. And eventually just realized we can't really believe in this anymore, or practice it.
But don't you think that whether you believe in heaven and hell or whether you don't, most people want to make every day the best day they can? I mean, there are certain fundamental, you don't think so?
I think it depends on the person. I think most of us, yes, because, life is not exactly simple. So we are trying to make the best of what we're doing. Occasionally there are some forms of religious ideologies that make them heaven focused. So they tend to miss out on the present and what's here and invest in what's here, thinking that, we'll just wait till heaven. It's heaven, heaven, heaven. It's a whole nother kind of subject.
Well, and that,
but
that
most people are probably not quite like that. The average American is not probably like that.
I also think that, in fact, I've been reading that the mainstream religions are losing congregants.
Oh yeah, by droves.
So why do you think that is? I mean, they come obviously from families who have been Christian for quite a while.
I think there's multiple reasons. One of the books that have the best kind of actual well-researched reasons is Phil Zuckerman's book, Living the Secular Life, and he shares that there's a couple factors. One, the internet might be the most obvious. So our access to information and being able to challenge our ideas of things. We can hear many different voices, many different ideas. We can want to know something, look it up. Now, granted, you now have to know how you look for your sources.
Yes, I have a little
you got to be careful of that.
Yes,
but
I
for
do
the
have a
most
little
part, we
yes.
didn't have this access to information. It wasn't so readily available. And then furthermore, one of the really fascinating things, I think, is that women entering the workforce and empowering women in some element of feminism has actually helped because women were the backbone of the church for so long. And now that we're empowered to work and empowered to contribute, I think that has kind of pulled us out of the church, and we can find value and contribution.
Okay,
by being
well,
in the
let's pull a
workforce.
couple of threads out of that. One thread is empowerment, and the other is access to information. And they're very much related. I suppose I had them in the wrong order. Access to information and then empowerment should have come second.
Yeah.
But that goes for men too.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Certainly does.
So, do you find now you have said you have about 200 people on your email list? So
we have more on our email list. I think we're close to 600 or
okay.
So
you get about 200.
We're averaging 150 to 200 on a Sunday.
Okay. So what are they? All men, all women, equal children? I mean, everybody's welcome.
We're multi-generational, which the secular community hasn't been able to pull off yet. And so that's really encouraging because we're a good landing spot for women, especially families. One of the things when we had left church and we had children, unlike a lot of people who have children, and then they go flocking to church because they're like, well, now we need people and community because having a family is not simple or easy. And so you need that support. And we couldn't find anything. We didn't want to go to church. At that time, we didn't want our children being told they were broken or that they needed something or they had to make this really big decision on something that they're really not capable of making. I want my children to decide for themselves what they believe eventually. Don't get me wrong, but my children are pretty young. I don't want to put them in that quite yet. But we didn't have a place for families. And so then it dawned on me, why aren't we doing this with, kind of finding ways to build community and connection and remove the things that we don't ascribe to or don't believe in anymore. And so we've been able to bring families in, because most other secular organizations were getting old white men or 30 and under crowd were starting to connect over activism kind of things. Activism was never that. I think it's important and someone needs to do it, but it's never been like my growing passion. I love helping people and connecting people, which is kind of how I fell into all of this.
Well, you know, I have some friends who are Buddhists,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
they believe in reincarnation.
Uh-huh.
So the little girl is 4, and she goes to preschool, and one of her little classmates lost a cat, and she said to the little girl or the friend, she said, "Don't worry," she said, "because the cat will be back." And he said the teacher didn't quite know how to take that.
Yeah.
And she was telling him when they came for parents' night. So you see, it's sometimes difficult to be different.
Oh, very. Yeah. No, that's true for sure.
But see, to me, differences, it doesn't make any difference what you believe or what I believe. We make each other stronger.
Precisely, and that's kind of what I've been stressing. I think we're finding that, you know, in our society, we tend to be pretty polar. We see it in our political system. It's quite alarming. But I feel very encouraged by the next generation that, you know, and maybe we can all learn how to have really great civil discourse, completely disagree,
Well, I
and
hope
love
you're-
each other by
I
the
hope
end of the
you're
day,
right,
right?
but
I
I'm
know,
not so
right?
sure.
Hopefully, we can
It's a good,
aim
it's
for
a good
that.
thought. Hold that
It's a
thought.
good
yes.
thought. You know, you never know. And that's kind of, I think, what's interesting. So yes, you know, our goal is to be a landing spot for those who don't fit in church or the unaffiliated. But within that,
But
we have a
also
lot of
the
diversity of thought.
The questioning are welcome. too.
Absolutely, yeah. We try to make it a good spot where anyone kind of can land and try to connect with
So,
people.
okay, so you meet every Sunday morning.
We do.
Now, we don't pray, and we don't talk about religion as such. What do you discuss?
Well, the options are endless because we're not constrained to one book. So all kinds of items. For example, we've had a psychiatrist come talk about the importance of sleep. We do things like TED Talk, so just things that are interesting, either science-wise. We try to do things that are inspiring, that add to value to your life. You know, help you think about being a better person. Also, ways to, you know, we've had some talks on climate, you know, issues. We like to present information that creates dialogue or conversation. So we aren't telling people what to believe or what to think. What we hope is that we get the conversation and dialogue rolling. You don't have to agree with what the speaker says, but what we hope is that, you know, like, hear it. Well, hey, let's go talk about it now.
At least it will make somebody think.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's deconstruct this just a little
Okay.
bit. And within this Sunday meeting, we find social contacts. We find a community. We find the ability to express one's feelings. All that comes into that Sunday meeting.
Absolutely. We bring in live, we do live music every week. We bring in local talent, so it varies every single week. So 3 weeks ago, we had a hip hop, and he does hip hop and rap, actually.
I don't understand a word those people
But it's a lot of diversity. We have a full jazz ensemble, Orograph, coming in a couple weeks. We had a folk singer the week prior. So really, just like, the options for subjects and music are, you know,
Do you find
endless.
that people come only when they want to hear? Well, how about the audience?
Varies,
Or do
varies.
most of them come regularly?
I've been shocked that we have more regulars. You know, I kind of figured when I started this that the format itself, you know, different topics and different speakers, different music would draw people here and there. But we have a lot of regulars, no matter what the subject is. Even if, like, they'll tell me, well, this doesn't really interest me, but they're totally going to still come and enjoy
Because
it.
there are other things within that meeting that
There
are
are.
important to them.
There are. Well, I mean, just being able to kind of see a familiar face. We try to make it a really warm and friendly,
But
positive
everybody
environment.
wants to belong someplace.
Yes.
I mean, it's very important.
Yeah,
Helen.
it is true. And I mean, absolutely.
So,
And for those of us who don't, you know, belong to church or religion.
free thinkers of one kind or another have been somewhat marginalized.
True.
And so, I make no value judgment, but I think that is the truth. And,
It's the truth.
But I think that an organization like Oasis releases that marginalization.
Absolutely, it does. We do something else. We do a community moment is one of the kind of unique elements that I think actually does help draw people in. We have someone from our community share a thought and or idea every Sunday. So people who have talked about their personal experiences or give some life wisdom of theirs, or we've had really funny ones like how to dance. But there are opportunities for people to be vulnerable and vulnerable from the front. And so it's built, I think, a culture of trust to some extent with that.
That's
and then they
important.
connect because then they learn something about someone else. So we have live music, we do our community moment and have our featured speaker. And that's our Sunday experience. And it's a common shared experience for everyone too. So then during the week, we have social events, we have like dinners, and we do potlucks, we do game nights.
So you keep it going.
Absolutely. So Sunday is just the start of
But
it.
see, that's important because if you met maybe once a month or you would lose your.
You do. You can't build. I would say it'd be difficult to build really close relationships without frequency.
Well, I know your group is going. See, I read all the material. Your group
It
is
is.
growing because you've had to move.
Yep. Yeah, we've moved 3 times so far. It's been wild. I knew that this had a lot of potential, but I did not foresee it taking off like it has. It's been very, very encouraging for
Well,
sure.
I also, I noted that some of the leadership, and this isn't the only chapter of OASIS,
This is not. Yes.
but
we're
some of the
second.
leadership are former pastors.
Yes. Well, just Mike Alice, the original founder of
Right.
Houston Oasis.
He is a former pastor.
Absolutely.
And what made him unravel?
I think the same thing. We both experienced very similar journeys in the sense it was a matter of information. It was a matter of reading and just kind of coming to the realization that it didn't hold ground.
Well, and you make the comment that human hands solve human problems. I think that was sort of an interesting sentence.
Well, the values I do credit. So Mike Alice of Houston Oasis, the founder, he and his team are the original authors of the values, and that is one of our values: human hands solve human problems. So I think when you come out of Christianity, at least, I can only speak from that experience, and you watch prayer not work. It's very frustrating because you want to help people. And so you realize, well, then now on this end, it's like, well, what can we actually do? What can I do to help you through this really crappy time?
So you're sort of like social workers in a way.
I mean, maybe.
Well,
I guess so.
Yeah,
I mean, human connection is proved. It's just as important that you have strong social relationships as quitting smoking, as eating right. All of those healthy things that your doctor tells you to do.
I don't eat that.
I know, right? I mean, your doctor
yeah.
should be asking, how many close friendships do you have? What's your social support network? Well, I think even they're talking about addiction, that they're starting to find that one of those key ways that people overcome addiction is they have really great social support systems. So what church has been offering.
Why AA meets every week.
Precisely, and that's why they do really well, because they're creating that opportunity for that as well. I mean, so we way underestimate in our culture how important our human connection is with one another.
Would I be correct to say that the Oasis movement, let's just take it, has taken the best of some of these support kinds of groups and repackaged it, if you will, for those people who have considered themselves free thinkers and somewhat marginalized?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you put that. I think it's accurate.
I think that, well, talk about, I think it's interesting. Can you take 2 or 3 members? I don't need to know their name.
Sure.
But give me a cameo of maybe 2 or 3 really different kinds of people that are in your congregation.
We have our fair share, especially in Kansas City, we have a pretty large Mormon population. So we have those who are leaving religion, some of those being ex-Mormons or Mormons who are highly questioning, kind of like a lot of Christians experience as well. For them, what I have found is that when you're leaving the Mormon community, you can be ostracized. And so providing a place like this, they recognize the value of community immediately because it's all they know. Mormons are really great community builders. And so when they realize they don't believe in it anymore and desperately, one, like you said, feeling marginalized, feeling completely lost and alone, because they're very tight knit. Mormons are, and so providing a place for them to be to see even another ex-Mormon. I've heard that, like, out of all things, they've said, I want to meet another person who's come from the same background as me, and know that I'm not crazy for even questioning this.
So socioeconomically now, take this Mormon group. Are they middle class, upper class?
Most middle class. And I think
Professional
it's
kind of people?
professional, which I think would be pretty typical of most Mormon of culture and Mormon.
Okay, well, let's take another kind of person. Let's take an older. Think of an older person that comes in. What would I see?
It varies greatly. So I have some who
Well, pick an interesting one.
an interesting one. It's hard. That's hard. It would vary. So pretty much you could name it, and we have someone from that experience. I mean, we have some older individuals who never were religious, religious in the sense of being very ideological, and say I am Christian, or I am this religion. One I can think of, she's more, I would say, Buddhist to some extent, but she believes something is out there, but she doesn't know what it is, and I can agree with that. There's a lot of those terms and labels that you listed. No one defines them consistently. It's really it's frustrating because people believe things with that. But
life is something of a smorgasbord.
Exactly, it totally is. So that's kind of how she's very, I would say, very much a free spirit, but also, knows that there may be something out there, there may be not, but she really feels like she can really fit in and plug in at Oasis. And then I have some other individuals who came out of Catholicism. A lot of the older they are, I notice they're sometimes more likely to have the spouse who does not agree with them on where they are at religiously, and that can be very tough for them.
It is tough.
And we've had people share that in community moments as well.
But they want to stay badly enough to face that problem.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of interesting.
They do.
I think, too.
They do. And so I think that
How about the
that's
children?
a big draw.
Talk about some of the children, the teenagers particularly that come in.
The teenagers, well, right now, since we've only been around for a year and a half, we don't have a formal program yet. So we have a handful of teenagers, but not as much as we would like, because we just need a leader to step up and kind of get some social events going and get that ball rolling. But the next generation is pretty secular. So, I mean, as much as those who are religious want them to believe as their parents have believed or whatever, culture is shifting drastically. And so if you've seen the demographic surveys, that if you are, even 30 and under, you're so much more likely to just be non-religious. It's it's a non-issue. It's not a matter of being angry or leaving the church. It's just I
think too is that some of the younger generation are also colorblind. They tend to be more colorblind than the older generation,
Exactly.
where there were very definite lines of demarcation, if you will.
Absolutely, that's a really good way of putting it. Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of it can't entirely be the transfer of information.
It's
isn't. Got to be something else.
Oh well, no. And morals and culture build up a lot. I mean, the world we live in definitely, is who we are.
And the world we live. See, that's the important clue. I think the world we live in is definitely different, and I think this is me speaking, but I think that world changed with Vietnam. I think the Vietnam War changed and particularly in the United States. In the United States, I'm talking how people thought, because in that war, we were not engaged, and we haven't been engaged. But there has been trouble in the world, and people, I think, are less likely to hold as tightly to the mythology of religion, whichever it may be, because it takes a big leap of faith often to do that.
Yep.
And they kind of wonder, well, should I do that? Should I not? That's a big leap. Do I believe that? And I don't know. Do you think you have to believe 100%? See?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't
either.
think most people do.
I don't think so either. They used to.
They probably used to. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people read their Bibles either. So a lot of people are not well informed of their religion as it is.
I think the people who do would take exception to that comment.
But they're rare. So it's
well,
not
that's
common.
true. But I think the comment really is there are fewer and fewer that do that.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
And they tend to be, the fewer and tend to be younger and younger.
Yep.
Which I just think is interesting. So where is Oasis going? Where are you going to go with this thing?
We plan on being able to continue just as we are, to continue to, connect people and this grow as we, organically grow and connect people. So,
but is Oasis planning on opening up chapters? And there's one in
okay. So the Oasis Network.
Dallas.
So we have Boston right now is the most concrete one, and we have a few other in the works right now that we're waiting to announce. Yes. So with DFW, there was one that had started to put together a team as well, and then we have a few others around the nation. So my role with the network is to help support those communities and what I've learned and what Mike has learned in doing what we're doing, because we're kind of doing something that hasn't.
Do both of you do this full time?
I actually still run my full time. I have a business that I run as well. Mike does this
You're
full time.
An organizational expert.
I am, ironically enough, of spaces. Ironically enough, I guess you could throw events in there now, but originally it was like spatial kind of stuff and coaching of people. Yeah, we get inquiries every week. We've gotten inquiries from Australia and Greece on saying, what are you doing and how are you doing this?
Doesn't that just kind of blow your mind?
It's wild.
People are so interested in that.
It's crazy. Time Magazine ran a piece on Houston Oasis last year at this time, and that kind of fostered a lot of the interest that was international, because I think it went out in their international publication. And so it's crazy.
If someone would like to join you, how do they do that?
Just go to our website. It's kcoasis.org. We meet in Kansas City. It's the Tony Aguirre Center. That's right now. We plan on staying there for quite a while. We do.
And it's 17th and something, isn't it?
I should know that it's near Southwest Boulevard. Yeah. It's near the Crossroads District, just a little bit far removed. We try to make it as equally inconvenient to everyone in Kansas City. We try to be as central as possible, because we are pulling, contrary to churches, we have people who drive an hour every week to come.
Really?
It's wild.
So we're talking a couple hundred people.
Oh yeah, we have people literally from as far north, west, east. We have people who come all the way from Lawrence every single week to be a part of it.
Interesting.
You need to come.
Well, I just might. Because I truly believe that religion as life is a smorgasbord, and we take from each what is important to us.
I agree. Yeah.
And to me, it makes each of us a more interesting person to look about us and see what others think as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I do have to say thank you so much for coming. I think that it's always good to see and hear and meet our neighbors, and Helen Stringer is a most interesting person. And you've come a long way from the Pentecostals. I do have to say.
It's true. Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
I mean, I just had to say that.
It's true, though. Yeah.
But I would say to you that Kansas City Oasis, and I'm quoting you,
thanks,
is Kansas City's first alternative to faith-based communities, offering a community of compassion and reason to come together to celebrate the human experience. It's a place where life is celebrated, family valued, and all people are welcome. So, what's not nice about that? So I hope that at least it will be of interest to some, and hopefully to all, to find out that there are differences in the world to be celebrated.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Helen Stringer, she's our neighbor, and it's wonderful to have you with us. And I'm Mary Davidson, and I'm so glad to see you. We'll be back again soon.